existing friends. We're pleased to welcome existing friends of Alberta Mentoring Partnership. We also refer to ourselves as AMP, and thrilled to meet those of you who are new to AMP. I'm Sarah Chan, the lead of community engagement and relationships on our AMP team, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Today marks the second AMP Summit 2022, Omanitewak, giving them our best. And we're proud to be able to host it virtually here with all of you. But before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously helped us make this event come together successfully. Shannon Whalen and her team of tech hosts from the Calgary Regional Consortium, the AMP team with Al, Tanya, Andy, Kim, Rochelle, a little bit myself, but mostly everyone else, as well as our keynote speaker, elder, presenters, and our youth panelists. Take a minute to think about someone who made an impact and supported you when you were a teen or a young adult. Mentoring, whether formal or informal, can help create connections and have been shown to increase academic achievement, positive mental health, decrease unhealthy behaviors in both the mentor and mentee. Today, you'll hear from presenters and youth on ways to develop healthy relationships and support youth mental well-being. Over the past 20 months, youth have been living in a challenging world and may be feeling more disconnected and disengaged than ever before. Our hope is that today provides you with food for thought around mentoring and establishes useful connections to assist you in providing sustainable mentoring opportunities. I encourage you to connect and engage with the presenters through the digital options offered in the sessions, such as unmuting your microphone to share, having your camera on, and adding thoughts and comments in the chat box. Now, I'd like to introduce Dion Kennedy from GOA's Children's Services to introduce Dr. Leona Makokis.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning. I'm Dion Kennedy. I'm the Executive Director of a branch in Children's Services called Family and Youth Supports, and I also co-chair the Alberta Mentoring Partnership. So it is my great pleasure to be here today and to introduce the keynote speaker for our summit this morning. We are very privileged to be joined by Dr. Leona Makokis. Dr. Makokis is originally from Saddle Lake Cree Nation and now a band member of Kehewin Cree Nation. She was president of Blue Quills First Nations College from 1992 until retirement in 2010, and has extensive teaching and research experience with a focus on leadership and revitalization of Cree language, Kehewin, culture, ceremony, and tradition. Today, we will join Dr. Makokis in an exploration of mentorship through the lens of identity and belonging through the Cree language. She will guide us through the Creator's 4 natural laws, sharing the significance of relationship and community while highlighting our roles as teachers and mentors in how we live our lives. Please welcome Dr. Makokis.
Thank you so much for this invitation. That's quite an honor. So I usually begin my presentation with a short prayer, giving thanks for the gift of this day, and for all the participants that are involved in this session. Kiguan manina Nehewak. Inatante stapo gaitama, Mitete Pentawasum Standex, no Marks Tegminatos Ketek. So Itamongiska. Thank you. So the other thing I thought was important is although I don't have a smudge, but the smudge teaching that was taught, you'll see that if you're involved in any of our communities, you may be expected to smudge if you're a part of that meeting or what it does is that it grounds you. It's usually in a bowl, and the smudge that we use is sweetgrass, sage, and other medicines. And what we do with that is we light it up, and then we take the smoke and put it over our heads for clarity of thought. It's important that when we're going into a session or when we're saying something, we need to have clarity of thought. What are we here for? And then we smudge our ears so that we can hear. Not just listening, but to hear and to understand. And we're told that a lot of the healing takes place when you're listening. When you listen to somebody, that you can be listening and understanding and hearing them. We smudge our eyes, and again, in the language, eyes is miskisik, and kisik is in reference to the heavens. So when we smudge our eyes, it's like giving thanks for the gift of the heavens, gift of the Creator, so we can see the beauty that the Creator has created for us. And we smudge our mouth. Again, our mouth is mitum, and it's connected to midday, our heart. So what's in our heart, we should be saying it. And oftentimes a reminder that we have to be very cautious about what we say, because we may be hurting or saying something that's hurtful to us, a person, and they carry that damage with them. So being always aware of that. And of course, we smudge our hearts, because that's where we come from. And we're always told that the longest journey you're going to have is from your heart, from your head to your heart. So always reminding us that that's the source of our information, our feelings, our emotions, and all that. And we smudge the gifts of the body. So that's a little bit of a lesson about smudging. And I know you hear a lot, or you see that even on TV. So my presentation, unlike our Western understanding of mentorship, this presentation is given from a Kehewin Cree perspective. And I will be using the language to explain the concepts embedded in our words. First of all, I'll talk a little bit about what our language is. Our Cree language is not, it's unlike English, French, Spanish, because our languages are made up of, it's very verb-based. And there's no genders, no he or she. And it's animate and inanimate. An example of a verb-based is example.
Hey, this is Ben with National Captioning. How are you doing?
Good, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'll be taking.
Mitsu is to eat. Mitsu natik, mitsu, that's a table. Mitsu is the eat. Natik is again made of wood. Mitsu natik is table. So that's, from the verb comes the noun. And no genders, definitely no he or she. So growing up, we never referred to anybody as he or she. It was always in terms of our relationship with that person. So that's, very important in who we are in creating relationships. And then we have animate and inanimate. An example of, again, how we break our words down or what they mean is, awa is in reference, when we say awa is square, awa says, awa is in, that awa means it's animate. Uma means it's uma mitsunatic, it's inanimate, it's without spirit. So when you take the word awa sis, awa is spirit, sis at the end of the word means small. So really awa sis is a small spirit on a human journey. So that's all very meaningful for us. And when we introduce ourselves, it's important on how you introduce yourself. Because it's establishing your place, establishing, your family, your community. So I would say, Leona Makokis, Nia Nehio Isquil, Nigawi, Alice Pan, Nuhtawi, Vernon Pan, Onitigiscupuni Kutsinia, Mga kinukamase nitakim gawin. So the translation is, my name is Leona Makokis. I'm a Cree woman. My parents are late Alice and Vernon Makokis. I am from Saddle Lake Cree Nation. I am a member of Kehewin Cree Nation. So the explanation of those terms and meaning, mid-season actually comes from the word mid-sea, my belly button. And when you say nitsikasun, as I am, nitsikasun, then it's reference to your connection to your mom and to all your relatives from there. And Nehio, we call ourselves Nehio, Cree people, but it comes from the term Neo, Yo. Neo is four, and that's, we're talking about 4 dimensions of our body. You know, the emotion, the spirit, the physical, and the mental part of it. And we're always taught that to live in a balanced life, which is miyukmatsu, the good life. When we have a balanced life, then, you know, we're all taken care of, and then we can live in harmony. My parents, Ninigikwak, one at the end means that they're deceased. They've passed on to the next world. So both of my parents are deceased. And also the importance of place, where I'm from. So when you're introducing yourself, then a lot of people will have connection to that place and may well know those people or how you're related. And that's how you, again, become connected. And also that's where you start developing relationships. Then there's conversations about how you're related, or the community, or whoever you're introducing yourself to gets a better picture from where you're from. And that connection and that relationship building is key to everything that we do. And I think one of the teachings that we always know for, and we're talking about the 4 dimensions, but we're also grounded in four of our say we call natural laws. So a long time ago, the Creator gave us 4 natural laws, and all of these are passed on through an oral language that we're taught. It hasn't been written, but it's lived out, so to speak. So all our lives depend on them, and they are not changed. They haven't been changed since they were given to us. And the natural laws are first. Again, our relationship to the plant and animal kingdom is important. So we acknowledge that they do teach us. For example, the grass is a simple symbol for the lesson of love and kindness. We know that if the grass is stepped on, plowed, burnt, it'll always grow back. Grass always grows and blankets our Mother Earth with green and saves it from soil erosion. Grass teaches us that love and kindness will also prevail. And also in the grandmother's teachings, when you're with the pipe ceremony, the first lesson that we get from the grandmothers is that as spirits coming into the human world, we ask to be born. We ask so that we can experience love, not just receiving love, but be able to give love. And that our grandmothers from the spiritual world prepare us with a gift and a purpose. So that's another strong belief that we have. The second law is honesty, Weeskatsu. It is symbolized by a tree, a mitos. Like children, if we give a tree mitos, sun, water, everything needs to be healthy. It'll grow strong, straight, and beautiful. When we grow tall and straight, we never need to worry about being ashamed. We can stand tall and be honest and true with everyone around us. The third law is based on sharing. We tichtuin. We learn from the buffalo, Pasqualmostos, who provides us with everything we need to be alive. It gives us its life for us so that we can live miokmatsun, the good life. People offer tobacco. a prayer of thanksgiving to the animal prior to a hunt. This is why the hunter does not take credit for the kill. The hunter bestows the credit upon the animal who came to give his life for ours, because what we get from the animal is the hide is used for clothing, for our teepees, the meat, of course, for food, and there's medicine in the animal. There's tools we can make from the bones. Everything that we need comes from the animal. So sharing is, and the other thing is that it's not just material stuff that we share. We're encouraged or asked, or it's a part of our duty to share the gifts that we've been given, and also to again, fulfill our purpose in life so that we can help and share with other people. The final law is strength and prayer, which are represented by the grandfather rock. And here again, that's animate. Our grandfather rock is animate, unlike the English term, because it's used in ceremony as well. And again, at the time of the creation, the grandfather rock, offered to be a part of ceremony that made sure we did things in the right way. If we made a mistake in ceremony, he would ensure that protocol was corrected in the spiritual world. That is why there's always a rock, a grandfather, as a part of every ceremony, to remind us that sometimes we can be forgetful, but that he will always be there to straighten our prayers for us. And again, the importance of the rock is that sense of determination. And oftentimes we use the rock, the energy of the rock, when we're in circle and we're dialoguing, so that that keeps us focused as well. There's also, we use the word wakuhtuan, which means our relationship to our Mother Earth and what she offers. And it's where the plants, animals, birds, water beings, that guides us in this world and teach us. And so as kids, when our elders were talking teaching us a story or telling us a story, they used to refer to the animals as your brother, the wolf, and so for us in Cree, it was just a natural way, of how we saw the world, because everything was related in terms of the trees, in terms of, the animals, the birds. Therefore, wakumtun is how we're related, as far as human beings, like the relatives that we have around us. Wakumtun. So there's two ways of saying that. And therefore, wakumtun are very important, because both are teachers, mentors, and model. They model how we live our lives. So when you're talking about modeling and mentoring, a lot of the mentoring and the modeling is just by observing the animals, the plants, and the seasons and all of that, and that we can learn from that, and also ensure that our relationship to Mother Earth is reciprocal. What we take from her also is what we have to give back. So we are an oral culture. So teaching stories are what carries the culture forward to the next generation. Each person who hears a story understands it as it applies to their existence. This means we are taught a way of understanding the world, rather than a set of rules that dictate our behavior. When we hear a story, we are responsible to apply it to our lives. This means that we are accountable for how we carry ourselves and how we treat our relations. As an example, I will share a prophecy about Omanitewak, and this was shared by late Dave Christine, and how the story has guided us in the way we treat visitors into our homes and our communities. So Omanitewak, and that's what we call this, this presentation, are visitors that arrive in our territory or in our homes. Again, from this prophecy, the Creator had a vision in creating the world. And therefore, when placing humans in their homelands, each was given a responsibility and a gift. The responsibility was in relation to the four elements: earth, wind, water, and fire. And again, all of those elements were related to, we call our Mother Earth, our grandfather, the wind, our grandmother, the water, and our grandmother, the fire. And which would be the people's learnings. Then, as a complement, the Creator gave each human race a gift to nurture and eventually share their understanding of the power and wisdom gained by honing their gift. The Creator's vision was given as a gift to the red people, and that's us, Indigenous people, to keep the gift of spirituality. The red people would be granted the power to remember the laws of the Creator, the stories, the language of the heart. This oral tradition would contain the vision of the Creator, who created in us the ability to nourish and nurture the spirit, no matter what chaos, trouble, or turmoil befell the people. The responsibility of the red people is the land. The land is ours to steward. The animals, plant life, and their relationship to the earth were taught to the red people through stories. These stories were accompanied by seasonal ceremonies and rituals for the purpose of maintaining balance between the earth and the sky. The red people learned of their ability and continue to preserve the balance between taking and giving back based on need and use on the lands known as Turtle Island. So reciprocity is so key to our lives. In this area of responsibility, the red people have learned the sacredness of Mother Earth. The red people have been granted the responsibility to maintain Creator's vision of the land. The sacredness and the gift of vision was heralded across the land in four directions. This was known to the elders a long time ago. They told us that in order to keep this land alive and in balance, we have to perform our ceremonies in our language, and because language is very important. The second youngest of the human beings are the yellow people. They are responsible for the air element. They have learned to use air for health and vitality. Their traditions include discipline and revitalization and flow of life's energy. The gift given to the yellow people was to do with emotions, as these are linked with the body and mind. The people of this tradition have navigated the teachings about emotions and their relationship to the energy of well-being, vital forces, and health and meditations. From these traditions, we can understand and practice the steadfastness attending to our emotional health. The Black people are the oldest of the human beings. The gift of the Black people is that of the physical dimension as related to the body. The Black people have been granted this gift to develop self-esteem, self-awareness, and self-determination. The responsibility of Black people is watered and in learning how to use the benefits of life. The white people were given the gift of fire to learn and control. The white people are the youngest and have developed their responsibility with thoroughness and to their advantage. The use of spark, motors, generators, electrical power have been created. Since then, other uses of fire have resulted in electricity, microwaves, lasers, and atomic energy capacities. These inventions have made life easier to live, and life expectancy has increased due to the aid of technology. The white people have been granted the gift of mind. They were to develop rationality and communication. They are responsible for effective communication and understanding among all peoples. Because without that, we cannot share our gifts. White people have used rationality as a tool to exploit human beings and Mother Earth and have capitalized from the whole of the circle. The mind is powerful, but requires the balance of the heart. The vision of the Creator is that each component of the circle would develop their gift and responsibility, and when they were ready, would come to the land of the red people. Here they were to create opportunities for dialogue, where sharing their gifts would result. Then when each of the gifts have been shared and everybody's living the life of the four gifts, the Creator's vision would be realized. The people recognize that in unity, they are stronger. How did we implement the teaching of Omanitewak in our homes and communities? Oftentimes, when people talk about with the arrival of Europeans here, they talk about how they helped them, healed them from that long trip that they had over the ocean, and they welcomed them because this was a prophecy, and then it translates into our own homes. So this term was very important while I was growing up. When our family received travelers in our home, immediately our parents would prepare for them. So they would ask us to cook for this family, and it may have been 10 people, or maybe a family with 10 kids or other. So as soon as they got in, that's what we did. And if they were going to stay overnight, we gave them the best of what we had there. And of course, they would bring in their gift as well. They would bring their stories, and sometimes they would bring their medicines and share that with us. And when they were ready to leave, and this is the days of horse and wagon, we didn't have vehicles then, my mom would ensure that we would ensure that they had enough food or supplies until they reached their next destination. And as they were leaving, my dad would offer or give his gun to the man. And my mom was a seamstress, so she would give her blankets to the woman. And we ensured that they were well taken care of. So I think naming this conference here as Omanitewak, I think is meaningful, because even in the work that we do, that when we have clients or families coming to visit us, we should give them the best of what we can and prepare them for their next leg of their travel, where they're going to, so that they can again survive in what they're doing and where they're going, and that's our responsibility. So if this can be practiced in our organizations where we serve clients, mentors, mentees, it would mean that providing the best of ourselves to our community, and in this case, the youth, we will share our knowledge. And our elders always remind us that the knowledge is to be shared. I remember my late Uncle Mike telling me as I was going through my university, and he said, my girl, he said, you can have all this knowledge, you can have all this, book knowledge, you can have all the experience, you can have all the knowledge that's been passed down to you by the elders. But if you don't share it, it's only information for you. When you begin to share that information where people will benefit, it's called wisdom. So I think it's our responsibility when we go through our lives, our experiences, and I think for mentors to be able to share that knowledge to the mentees. So we share in everything we do. And the other thing is, to know is to do. One of our biggest, beliefs is that when we're taught something, then it's our responsibility to do that, to carry forth what we've been taught. So that, again, it's through mentorship, we share that, and then it goes from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. So that's important. And when we come together, it's an offering hospitality, that we're good to each other, that we learn from each other, that we create relationships with each other. There is a standard of how we treat others. We appreciate being treated well, so we also ensure we treat everybody well. And this creates a balance in our lives, a balance in their lives, which is important. Atamuna and Atayukeuna, Atamun is to tell a story. Atayukeuna are spiritual stories. And those are only told in the wintertime. And from my own experience, because I was in residential school, in the wintertime, we missed out on those stories. It's only recently, as I got older, that I began to, I searched for those stories, and that my responsibility is then to pass them down. But there are so many, and all of them are in the spiritual sense. And the other thing that prevented us from carrying forth these stories has been the fact that our spirituality, our ceremonies were declared against the law. So if somebody was practicing their ceremonies, they could be jailed for that. My great grandfather was jailed for not giving up his pipe, and they took the pipe, but they also jailed him. So a lot of what we're doing right now is, again, going back to who we are and practicing and using those ceremonies that we've been taught. And somehow we kept them through all of those hundreds of years. So through the use of our language and stories, we learn who and how to be in this world, how we treat our relatives and all of creation. I remember, again, when my brother and I had an older brother. He was a couple of years older than me. One spring day, we decided that we were going to, we wanted pets. And so we decided frogs would be great pets. So we ran behind the house in the slough, and we decided to take the smallest little frog, because they would, we'd have them longer, and they were cute. So we ran back to the house and showed to my mom. Hijo mama, look at these, mom, they're so cute, we said. And we offered them, and she just looked at us and she said, you. And she said, and you put them back exactly where you took them from. So we left the house and we ran back to the slough. But we didn't know what kind of trouble we were in, or what it was that my mother was not very happy about. So we came back very slowly, and then when we got home, she sat us on a bench and she said, "Do you know what you just did?" And of course we didn't know. She said, "Basta is when you cross a boundary. You've crossed that, and it's the natural law that we've been taught. You had no business taking those little frogs out of their homes." She said, "You keep doing that. Whatever you do to those frogs, whatever you do to those frogs, it'll come back to you. You will experience being taken away from home, and put someplace else." And so a few years later, of course, I was put in a hospital to begin with, and then into to the residential school. But for me, that experience and telling that experience, expressing it, has kept me on this moral path. Because when we would come home from the residential school, and I'm a family of about 13, we would, that's what she would say. She would tell the boys, "Don't you be shooting any birds. If they're not to eat, you have no business in doing that. It's going to come back to you. Don't you be laughing at people, don't you, all of these things that we weren't supposed to do to hurt people and animals and plants." She would remind us, because whatever he did would always come back. And that's how I've lived my life. So, and all of these stories, again, have been, so these teachings that we had, and I think, there's, part of the story is that we grow in one worldview, because I came from a community who spoke fluent Cree. As a kid, up until I was 5 years old, we never saw any kind of drinking or drugs or pills or any of those things. We never experienced that. We had a really healthy community where people were always, there were always people in our home coming to help my mom or my dad. We had a little farm, and then, you know, people would come together. It was always laughter. We would, every Sunday we'd come together and have a big meal, and then they would play ball, or they would play cards. I remember my dad used to play with us, and whoever the baby was, if he came up to bat, he'd have the baby in one arm and he would bat with the other arm. And he'd be running around in circles, you know, and making, doing a home run, so to speak. But you learn by watching that, you know, how your dad treated it, how the father treats you, being a part of that. It's just the learning that came through that. I've had a lot of great respect for my father and what he did all those years. And the other thing in the language, I'll go back to the language again. I mentioned that there was no genders. So growing up, my mother's sisters, all my mother's sisters, Nigawi is my mother, Nigawis is my little mother. You hear the SIS at the end. And my little mother had the same responsibilities as my mom towards the kids. All my Nigawis. If we went there, they disciplined us like my mom. They fed us if we were hungry. You know, if we were sick, they would take care of us. It was like having another mother. And on my dad's side, my Nuhtawi, his brothers, Nuhtawis, they did the same thing. So all of these cousins from Nigawis and Nuhtawis, those aunties and uncles, all the cousins were sibling cousins. So in relationships, we would call them Nistis, my older brother, Nimis, my older sister, Nasim, my younger sibling. And so we never, and of course we had nicknames by that time as little kids, but normally we would refer to each other as, we call each other Nasim, Nistis, you know, and when we were playing, then we would refer to them as that. And, but we never knew the names of my aunties, my uncles, my grandmothers. And as a child, we had grandparents, not necessarily my mom's mom and dad, were her aunties and grandparents that would come and live with us. And one couple never didn't own a home. After they raised their kids, they gave up their house and they lived amongst all their grandchildren. They would move as they felt they were needed. And my grandfather would get up at 5 a.m, and again, he would sing his song to the grandfather's son, welcoming our grandfather's son into our lives, welcoming that life that the grandfather brought to us. The grandfather's son, you know, the warmth, the newness of the day. All of those teachings were all in his song, his singing. And so at 5, and then of course my grandmother would wake us up and then she'd feed us breakfast. So those are the teachings that we carry on. And as well, the again, and in relationships, your mother's brother would be your Nisis, your dad's sister would be Nisigos. And in our kinship, they would be further away, but they had responsibilities. They taught us things that my parents wouldn't teach us, you know. I know my those uncles taught my brothers how to hunt, or whatever gifts that they had, they would share. My dad was a hunter as well, though. And for the women, for those aunties, the cross aunties of her, those also would teach us women different things. So, and the other thing in mentorship I was just thinking about historically is that we went through different stages in life, and each stage we had a ceremony attached to that. And there's a stage, I think the third or fourth stage was called a truth stage. And that was when young women, again, we were kids up until a certain age. When the boys made their first kill, then that was an example of they could become a provider. So all their boyhood days are gone, and now they're mentored into their responsibilities as providers. And there hasn't been a real transition in terms of what we do now, because a lot of people are in the cities, they don't hunt. And I often think that stage should be when they're going into high school, a stage where we celebrate and we really, again, mentor them into the roles that they're going to be. They're going to be fathers, they're going to be providers, and provide that support. It's so key. And for the girls, up until they played with dolls or whatever, and when their first moon time came, they were separated into a home for 4 or 5 days and mentored under the elders, the women or their aunties or grandmothers. And in that time, they were taught, again, they are the life givers. And so they were prepared to be the life givers. From that time on, it's in the mentorship. The grandmothers would be there to teach them how to sew, to take care of the home, the stories and the boundaries that they need to set for themselves, and just the maturity that they needed then and what their responsibility would be. So, after that, they're no longer little girls. They grew into young women with, again, the gift of childbearing. That was the biggest gift, the biggest responsibility in terms of how you raise children. And once we got into the next stage of marriage, a decision and then marriage, then these families then would be responsible to ensure that they would take those teachings again to use them in their own livelihoods. And so my story was that I had my son, and because I was in residential school, I never really, I just took it from Dr. Spock's book, I think it was, and how I was going to raise my kid, my son. And it was very strict and rigid because that's how I was used to being treated in residential school. So that's the way I treated him. And so, 6 o'clock, I would wake him up because it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I would feed him, and then I would, give him a bath, and then I would give him time to play, and then it was time for again a nap, and just very rigid. And so when you and it went on for quite a few years, and how I disciplined him as well. 9 years later, I had, in between the time he was born and the time I had my second child, I had gone back to ceremony and had gone back to those teachings that I had learned and was respectful of them. So with my daughter, I had her in a moss bag. I nursed her. I went through the ceremonies of giving her a name, and then a name giving is usually, the guiding spirit that's going to guide her through her life. And we know that. And then we had a celebration or a ceremony around her belly button. There's different ways of celebrating that. Usually what we did was we buried hers under a tree. And others may make a little pouch with that. So, and oftentimes the other thing too is belly buttons were put in places where, for example, if a mother or a parent wanted that child to be a hard worker and somebody who would work with other people, they would put it on an ant trail because you see how ants work together and how hard they work, and that's where they would put them. So and sometimes if it was wanting to be a hunter, he wanted them to be a hunter, again, they would do that for hunting. Whatever they foresaw that child to be, that's what they did. And then of course the mentoring started at a very young age. So those are I think, and also the other important thing that with my daughter is that I had a swing. I just swing like that. And again, and the natural way of, when my mother-in-law was really good at, if kids were crying, she would pick them up and she would hold them and she would tap them to get them back in balance. I didn't realize that, when they're all excited and just crying, and, she would take them, hold them and tap them, and then again, just watching her, it was mentoring, because we learn not just by our being told what to do. It's oftentimes is just kanawapata, means to watch, to learn by observing other people's behavior. And when you remind your students or your kids about to observe, that's how they learn, and that's how they take things in, and to hear and listening as well. Because I think part of the storytelling when we were told stories is that we learned to listen. We never asked questions ever. That was our responsibility, is to figure it out for ourselves. And I don't know if I should stop here for questions or comments. Sarah, I can't hear you.
Kim was just asking me in here if I had a question, and I was just thinking about how interesting it is that the mentorship you're talking about is not prescriptive. It doesn't, it's not like a instruction manual that you get on a sheet that says, step 1 is this and step 2 is this. And so anyone else can also jump in, but I think one of the takeaways that I'm getting is that the mentorship can be a part of your way of being. It's just a part of how you live. So can you expand a little bit more on that, maybe?
Yes. Children learn by their own experiences as well, right? And we never really got punished for things. It would be like, this is what happened. And my parents would say, well, what did you learn from it? What did you do to get there? Would you do it again? I remember my mom and dad going hunting with my uncle, and my younger brother and my younger cousin went with them. They're about maybe 9, 10. And so my dad and uncle saw some moose out in the distance, and they were on high hills. It was a cliff, so to speak, and they could see the animals down there. So they told my cousin and my brother, you stay here and you be very, very quiet, because if you make noise, they're going to take off. The animals are going to take off. So they sat there, and it's time, there's a lot of time for a little kid to be sitting there, and they sort of got bored, and they said, how about if we very quietly play hide and seek? So my cousin said, I'll go hide, and my brother said, okay, you go hide. So he counted to 20 or whatever. And this was in the bush. And he said, he started looking for her. Diane, where are you? And then he was whispering all over the place, and it was quite open. And he's whispering. And then he said he couldn't find her. And then he walked along the edge of this cliff. Diane, where are you? And finally, he heard a voice. I'm here, very lightly. And so he went over. She had fallen off a cliff and it was hanging on a tree. so, so he pulled her out. But that lesson, they tell that story all the time because of what they learned in not listening and not doing it. And so other people, other kids learned from them from that experience, but they didn't get punished. I think our parents felt that they already had received their punishment by scaring themselves silly. So, and it's like that. It's like observation. You know, the other thing I found is that as I was growing up, then you began to see into my adulthood, you began to see the drinking that was taking place. And I made a commitment. I saw these wonderful, wonderful people who are getting caught up in that. And I thought, no, that's not who I want to be. And I learned that that's not what I wanted to be, and that I wouldn't go there. And even that is a teaching in, lived experience. And, the other thing is in the language, somebody poor was not necessarily without money or without food or without that. It was somebody whose character did not, or person did not, for example, share. If they were considered stingy and they had all sorts of cattle and all sorts of animals and resources, but if they didn't share, people would consider them poor because they did not align with that law of the natural law of sharing. And so in terms of, again, that word was poor, was on that person and what they, if they didn't align with the community, or if they were a very angry person, or things like that, that they were driven by this rage, they were poor, not necessarily because, and they may have been well, they may be well off. So that terminology also is shifted. Now, of course, it's more money in terms of poverty. That the term poverty was changed. Oh, I meant to say that, there's our worldviews are different in many areas. And I think what we need to know is we need to be able to share our worldview. For example, when I went to Blue Quills, here's my mom telling us when we got home not to cross that boundary, or we would receive the whatever we did. But also it was our responsibility, if we did anything, if we crossed that boundary, it was our responsibility to fix it. Nobody could fix it for us. We had to fix that problem we caused, or something we did. And we were caught lying, and we knew we were lying. It was our responsibility to say, I'm sorry, I lied because of these reasons, and so you took that was forgiveness for yourself and for, potentially what could happen to you. So when we went to, then I was brought to, it was a Roman Catholic residential school I attended. And every Saturday we used to go to confession. And Sundays, of course, we used to go to Mass and receive communion. And so, but there was a list of sins that we had that were there. And, but as a 7-year-old, it's hard to figure out what sin you may have had. So for me, it was difficult to figure out what kind of sin did I sin, and it's you go every week. So, and then sin was called, Bastahun was transferred, was called sin. So I remember being listening to the Vigor girls, and they were talking about sins, and they spoke about gluttony. I understood that. No, that couldn't be ours here. And then they spoke about evil thoughts. that's a potential big sin. So I thought, wow, I found one sin. So every Saturday I would do the same thing. I would go tell the priest I had sinned, and I would tell him, Father, I had 4 evil thoughts this week. And then I would say to him immediately, and I lied 4 times, because I just knew I had lied, about my evil thoughts. So he would say, okay, go say your Hail Marys, your Glory Bees, or whatever, a list of sin, a list of prayers I had to say to get forgiveness. But when you look at it, when you observe now, on this side, it was being mentored into feeling that the priest could forgive me. I didn't have to do anything, because the priest now is talking to God on my behalf and forgave me. On this side is that if you don't take responsibility and correct what you just did, that it's going to come back to you. So these are 2 conflicting worldviews, and I mean, it seems slight, but now when I think about it, it's not. It's the way we view the world, the way we in our language. What does that mean? How does that direct us? How does that, the mentoring part of it is? So, and more, I guess in terms of, I know I've been mentored in jobs, but I think what for me in mentorship, it means creating that relationship, that there's a learner and somebody who's showing you or mentoring you, and that it can't just be information on how to do things. To be able to have a relationship where somebody mentoring with you then has the voice and the space and the questions that are so important to that person, because they may be at a different level or have taken a different education, so they need to be. So what you're also doing is sharing your philosophy about the job, about what you're doing. Does that philosophy align with theirs if they're coming in from a different worldview? So even knowing that, and another thing for me that was very, we were integrated into or assimilated by the Indian Affairs when I was in grade 6. So we were all bused. Now we were released from Blue Quills for residential school, and we were bused into town. And the townspeople had no idea who we were. We were Native people. And I hadn't seen any white people aside from the nuns and priests. So when it was a real shock when we went there. And the small things that for us really stood out was, the kids we were again financed by Indian Affairs, and they gave us a pen, just the basics. And we'd be in a classroom, and these kids would have, bags of pencils and crayons and a whole bunch. And I remember one time, again, the kids started talking. Do you notice they don't share? Because with us, it was, if my little brothers lost their pens, then one of us would break our pencils and give them half of it, right? It was just a part of who we are. And we found that extremely, extremely different culture. That, they had we saw all of what they had, but they wouldn't share. And so that was the biggest thing for us to see. This is a different culture. We're in a different place. And gradually, I think we began to accept that that's the way things are. And again, I think understand where people are coming from is going to help the teachers or the mentors on how they work with their students. It's key. But at the same time, we as Nehiyawak have to be able to be given the space to talk about these, because I've always said we generally lived in two worldviews, and the Western worldview is supported by everything, by education, by economy, everything, jobs and stuff like that, whereas ours hasn't been. And so we've learned to travel this path, for our jobs and whatever, but we're still who we are over here as Native people, as Indigenous people, and we need to be able to share our knowledge. When I talk about the land and how important that is, even the concept of buying land was new to us, because how could you sell your Mother Earth? And you'll hear that from the elders all the time, that there was no concept of selling land. Sharing was we were able to believe in sharing, and that's what we did in terms of the land. So now we're learning that we live on reserves and nobody owns the land. It's just communally owned. And here's another different, I guess, a different value system, or it's an economic system, is that in order to build a house, you need to own that land, right? On a reserve, you don't own the land, so you can't build a house, and get funded by banks. Again, it's hard. And the only way you can get a house is probably if you build it on your own over years and years, or you're given a home. And the homes that are built there are not always the best. So yeah, there's the housing shortages in our communities is really, really bad. I remember my daughter wanting to move back on the reserve, and they were ready to sell their house. They had bought a house in Bonneville. They had enough to build the house. They had enough resources, finances, but they didn't have enough for the roads and the power lines and the water and the sewer, stuff like that. And they tried to borrow the money from the bank, and not one bank would touch them because it's reserve land. You don't own that land. So they wouldn't be able to sell that house, as easily as they were in town. So a lot of these policies, a lot of this comes from a Western worldview, and we don't fit in that. So, which is why sometimes I think people need to know about this information, about, and I guess when it comes to mentoring, I think that's also very key when you're mentoring with especially Indigenous people, where they come from, what are their lives like, what's their belief system, where are they in what you're trying to teach them. And the other one we really believe in is that if you live to your gifts, and you use your gifts for the purpose that you're going to be, you're going to serve. And usually it's the purpose of helping your community, that will align. But if you go against it, then it's not, because your gift is not there, your interest will not be there. And to recognize that for some of our students that are mentoring, is that if that's not their gift, it's really going up a grain against them, and they won't do well. But as a mentor, if you can figure out their interest and align that with what they're doing, they'll blossom. So I'm open for another question. I hope that answered it. Okay, so You're muted. Okay, so we'll finish here and we'll do a wrap up. And thank you for inviting me. I sure appreciate it. Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Makokis. That was very informative and inspirational talk this morning, and thank you for sharing the Creators for Natural Laws with us. I can see how they can provide a foundation of how we live as well as guide how we build our relationships. Just by way of introduction, I'm Allison Blaine. I'm the current director of the School and Community Supports branch at Alberta Education and co-chair for the Alberta Mentoring Partnership. Omanitewak is giving the best of ourselves to our community, and the theme you provided us for this year's summit is key as we explore various ways to engage seniors, adults, young and old, and teens to mentor our most vulnerable youth, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, across the province. And so we know that mentoring relationships do play an important role in promoting development and continued well-being in children and youth. So by helping them build resilience and the necessary skills to improve their executive functioning, social relationships, and ability to cope in difficult situations, we need to give our best to them. And so I want to say thank you again for your talk this morning. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Tanya, actually, to provide an intro to our elder.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. We're just getting Elder Rick settled so that he can offer us a prayer this morning.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to Dr. Leona Makokis for sharing such amazing knowledge with us and your Cree language and your culture. Masicho, thank you, in Dene language. And we have our very special guest, Elder Musum Rick Lightning from Musqueam. He was a little late on the highway this morning, so we decided to start with Leona first, but no time like now to have Elder Musum Rick Lightning bless us with a prayer today. Musum?
You want the long version or short version? No tayo mga si how nas ko na minigis kami papatin was ka may sino was ka maskin ano tahayas lista pagsitan sa biway mo sa pinata mo notice gate agwa magiwet mo kaski wa bigo wa mapitibetats ka wan mas skate mo no tayo mga sewas so ay nitsay sino was ka maskin may chit makso ete akuskay I'm giving that up when we are to mark so 1 book 6 so a man give well what the askina nehiaski ego mina munia aski vistawa kete at mechet to mark so mina the magama out ni chai sino mo kwetsemta no tawi ma sewasi hi all my relations one of the things that's important to understand, like Leona touched on this on tobacco. Tobacco is, a lot of times people say, what is tobacco? What does that mean? Tobacco, it gives me the right to pray, to work on your behalf. In a ceremony, when tobacco is given to us, we take that, gives us the right to move ahead and say your name and ask the Creator for help, for you, to work with you. And to be able to give me the understanding and the willingness to take that, whatever you bring into the ceremony, into the sweat, if you're sick, to be able to leave that in that ceremony. One of the things I want to talk about is understanding what is our belief system. In our homes, our belief system's in there. But another word I discovered was ethics. When we talk about ethical practice, ethical procedures, and all this, I wonder, what does that mean? Ethics is based on belief systems. And we've been judged by non-Indian people on their ethics. Our laws are based on their ethics. How we live our lives is based on their ethics. The Indian Act is based on their ethics. That governs us, tells us when, how to be, what to do. Even to the point where it goes back to the point where even when people went to school and they got educated, they lost their treaty rights. They went to the army, they lost their treaty rights based on ethics, Canadian ethics. The reasoning behind that is you were too smart to be in India. So they took you, when you got your degree, or if you join the army, whatever, they took that away from you. We've been living behind this veil of ethics of Canadian history is based on ethics, all the way to the Prime Minister when he said, kill the Indian, save the child. Unfortunately, there's 10,000 children that didn't get saved. They killed the Indian and the child. They didn't separate the two. And so what's happening is we're living in this world today and everybody is trying to understand, who are these people? Why did this go away? The problem is we've been here first. And it's funny because the newcomers have been coming here and all of a sudden they see a mountain, they say, I'm going to call that McKinley Mountain. Not thinking maybe the people that were living there already had a name for that mountain. So they call it after their name, the English name. When we're baptized or brought into this world, our Cree names don't count. My name, I forgot to start off with this. Wapamas kwasilas, paskamas to soas, ecto eglano nota, ecto utsia. Maskuchilino ganisaisino. My spirit name is Whitebird. My father was Buffalo Child, Albert Lightning. I come from the Bear Hills people. And that's my history of where I am, who I am. Today we're in a world of generality because everybody, when people come from other countries, as soon as they get off the plane, they land on Canadian soil, they lose their ancestry. It's promoted by Canada because they say you're only 150 years old. We don't celebrate the 150 years. We're thousands and thousands of years old from being here. But it comes down to even to the point where even the churches told us, believe in our ancestors, not yours. And to this day, the churches are struggling with their own ancestors, and they're starting to come over to us and asking us about our ancestors. They're asking us about our ceremonies. They want to come in. The young people from all nationalities are coming and searching for God. And they're looking for a path to follow. I had a young man come in my sweat. He was a Filipino. His dad was Filipino and his mom was a white lady. So we're praying, and he says, I'm praying, and I said, how come you're not praying in your language? And he says, what language is that? I says, Filipino. And I said, who do you live with? He said, my grandparents. Well, go ask them, I'll teach you your language. Wherever you come from in the world, you should know your ancestry, know that language. English is not our language. If you're from Greece, is that your language? If you're from Africa, is that your language? Is English your language? What's your first language? And that's something we need to understand. When I go to a ceremony, we speak Cree. We call our grandfathers. There's certain words in our language that are keys, combinations opening that door so the spirits can come in to our ceremonies. But people don't understand that. And I had a young man say that to me one day. He said, I run a sweat. I said, my cousin, I said, oh, that's good. I'm glad. I didn't know you spoke Cree. He says, no, I speak English. I go, well, then you're running an English sweat. It's kind of like church. He says, no, it's a Cree sweat. No. If you speak French, it's French sweat. If you speak Chinese, it's Chinese sweat. But if you're speaking Cree, it's a Cree sweat. The language you speak in that ceremony dictates the fact of what ceremony that is. Go learn your languages. Be careful what you hold. You hold that sacred pipe. Like even this rattle today. I brought a rattle. I'm so proud of this rattle because I made it. I have like 10 rattles at home and they were all gifts. So I went to a rattle making workshop one day and they told me, Rick, you have to make a rattle. So I said, oh, okay. So I made this rattle. It's not perfect, which is good. Because nothing's perfect. So when I made this rattle, I asked the people who were doing this workshop, I said, now that we made these rattles, you know these call the spirits, they call the ancestors. When you shake it 4 times. Then that rattle, it calls them. They hear that up there, wherever they are. They hear that. And I said, there's a song that goes with this song. This rattle. And so that song comes with this rattle. So when you make these workshops and you have these rattles, they're not just for shaking. Those are baby rattles. Even the babies sing with their rattles. They know what those are for, the baby rattles. But as adults, we need to understand that. Sisi Win. Sisi Win, Peka And that says the rattle. We hear the rattle. Sisi Win, Peka One. We have that song for the rattle. And that's so important to understand that. When we make these workshops, people put them on, but they don't understand the significance of these things, what they're making. I was going to bring my drum, but I was in such a hurry this morning. I woke up. I'm a night person. I can go to house. I work and read at night till 3, 4 in the morning. I don't get up at the sunrise, but I'm pretty happy when I do wake up. And it's important, like, when old people try to call me elder, I'm not an elder. I'm not Mormon. I'm a Muslim. And that's important. Just like she said, no, she's probably a Chapas. She has great grandchildren. When all of you have been initiated, all you mothers have been initiated, by the most sacred ceremony, and it doesn't matter what color, what nationality you are, that we all share that ceremony. Was not when your child says, "Mom," you've been initiated. She recognizes who you are. When your child says, "No, Tawi," that's my ceremony to be a dad. Nemasom is the next ceremony I go through. And the only one that can initiate us, those names, are children, the innocent ones, because they recognize who we are. And that sacredness of that name, that mom is a sacred name. Dad's a sacred name. Grandfather's a sacred name. Great-grandfather's a sacred name. Those are sacred names. Today, we generalize everything. We don't take those things seriously. We need to look at those things. When Dance, my daughter, is a sacred name. Negosas, my son. And that's important. Ne. The problem we have in our culture is ne. It means mine. Koko. But today the schools are teaching koko. Also, they took the ne out of it. They put the ke in there. That means yours, your grandfather, your grandmother. But we need to bring ownership back into our families. But that's important to understand that in our lives. Sweetgrass. People see sweetgrass as, oh, this is the sweetgrass. I had a lesson one day. My father told me to take some sweetgrass to his own bed. And I gave him sweetgrass. To me, it was just sweetgrass. I didn't think nothing of it. So when I gave it to him, he started crying. I thought, what did I do wrong? And then he says, no, Sim, my grandson, you've given me the opportunity to, you've given me this, will carry my prayers to the Creator. He said in Cree, he says, thank you for giving me this gift. And he cried and he shook my hand. From that day on, I learned what that meant. And even when you pick, a lot of times people will say, here's a cigarette, can I have a cup 5 braids of sweetgrass? And I tell them, here's a pack, go pick it yourself. Then you'll understand why this is so, because each sweetgrass is individually picked. You can't pick sweetgrass like this. It's one at a time. It painlessly is picked, and then you make that braid. Then you put it in the water, then you dry it, and you tie it, and then you braid it. And then you let it dry. There's a process to making sweetgrass. Then people say, well, it's wrong to buy sweetgrass. Well, if you don't have the ways and means to go get it, what can you do? You need to pray, take it. It's for prayer. And that's like, but the thing is, I don't promote it. I'm just saying it's a reality. There's so many things in our life we need to understand. I'll share one of my last stories is, and I shared this with Tanya. I thought when I was a parent that when I died, I was done. I learned something. My mother had died, and I went to see my dad, and I went to have coffee with him. And he says, your mom came to me last night. I said, oh, how is she? She's in a good place. But she has to watch what she created on earth now. That's her penance. When my brother was murdered by RCMP years ago, we brought up his children. My mom was so heartbroken that she didn't realize that she spoiled these children, these 4 children. And they became spoiled, became alcoholics. Emotional cripples is basically what happened. So my mom did that out of love, and expewasu is a word we use, spoiling the child. After she did, now that she has to watch what she created on earth, and she died, now that's her part of her parenting. When you think, all your parents, you think you're done, when you die, you're not. You get to go back and watch what you created on earth with your children and your grandchildren. And that's important to understand that. That teaching I learned. It wasn't actually a teaching, it was the learning. And that brings me back to that part of mentorship. We talk about traditional teachings. To me, I believe in traditional showings. We need to make the effort to show the people. We need to be able to do that. My grandchildren, when they were 4 and 5, my wife brought them in. There was 4 of them. Told them, go shower downstairs. In my house, we have group showers. So the little guys went down there and had a shower. And there was a mat on a floor, and there's rocks. It looks like a water in a mountain stream. And she heard them. She bringing towels to them. She heard them. They're sitting in a circle, and they're singing they were singing my sweat songs on their own. And she thought that was so cool. And that's mentorship, is showing, taking the effort. Ektego, wapatamuk, tazumakwesmatotama. They see how to do it right. That's mentorship. But an English concept, mentorship is me telling Tanya how to do it. You should live your life this way. That's a muniao. That's a muniao. Us Nehio. And believe me, I grew up with, I'm a Mopiki and I was brought up with my grandfather. And I learned from old people. And believe me, there was no second chances. You had to learn when they took. And you need to know these things. When they tell you, you better be listening, because if you're not listening, it's your fault. There's no second doings there. I had a grandmother. I had this like girl with my niece she was having troubles with her pregnancy, and she was spotting, and it was really bad. So I called my mom in Saskatchewan, and another thing is we don't have hyphenated stepmom, traditional mom. If you're gonna call that word sacred mom, say mom. If you're gonna call him dad, say dad. The worst one is foster child. I remember I walked in a house and these were all white, blue-eyed family, and there's this brown Indian kid, and he says, "This is our foster kid." And I looked at her and I said, "Do you think I'm blind?" She goes, "What do you mean?" "Well, it's pretty obvious he's your foster kid unless you fool around with an Indian, because all the others are blonde and blue-eyed." She didn't know what to say. She's just shocked. And you're wondering why he doesn't want to have anything to do with you guys? It's because you segregate him right off the hop. Here, as soon as you walk in, "This is my foster child. Pat me in the back. Give me a feather. Give me a name. I'm doing so great." You know, if you're looking for praise, you're not getting it from me. You're doing this to this child right off the hop. You say you're a family, he's family, and you don't treat him like that. Your dog gets better treatment than this kid. You treat your dog like family. You don't treat this kid. You know what you say when I walk in? "This is our dog."
Thank you so much, Elder Rick, for your teachings and your blessing this morning. We'd really feel really blessed to have both yourself and Dr. Makokis join us this morning for our summit for 2022. My name is Kim McConnell. I'm the FASD and mentoring specialist at Alberta Education, and I'm a member of the AMP provincial coordination team that worked with the rest of the team to put this fabulous event together for you today. We're going to now move into a wellness break before the breakout sessions. So please remember to take care of yourself, get away from your screen, stand up and stretch, dance if you feel like it, and take care of your nutritional needs. I want to thank the ASL interpreters and SyncWorks for providing our accessibility this morning. The closed captioning will be available all day. You can use the SyncWork link and then split your screen, and then you can watch the closed captioning go alongside of the actual Zoom feed. Please refer to your schedule for the links for the breakout sessions that will start promptly at 10:30. At the end of your session, please join us back here in the main room for Tanya, our Indigenous engagement lead, as she's going to be talking about some resource tool spotlights at 11:35. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you at sessions at 10:30. Take care.